I want to introduce my next speaker who has wowed me. She's just an incredible and prolific woman, so much wisdom. And like every speaker, I just feel like I want to talk to her for hours. So I know that she'll enjoy this. She has a background in mental health. She's a licensed graduate social worker, bachelor's in psychology, a master's in social work. Um, she's then also got this incredible body of holistic health and well-being experience and knowledge that she brings to you and all of her clients. She's a trained Reiki master and teacher, a certified life coach, a spiritual guide and counselor, a hypnotherapist, a holistic aromatherapist, and yoga and meditation instructor. She's created two soul stirring podcasts. You can find her at Avalaura Heal My Life and Black Women Leave America, which you can listen to on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. She's been featured for her work in the Real Housewives of the Potomac, Afro American newspaper, Huffington Post, Reader's Digest, and The Root. She has amazing energy. Is so wise and gracious to be here. Thank you and welcome, Ava Laura. All right, so welcome, Ava Laura. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. It's been my pleasure.
So great, so great. So I told everyone, I think, and everyone's got a notebook and pen ready to listen to this self-love and letting go of toxic relationships. And before we jump into that, I just would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, to all these single women listening, and how you became an expert on this topic.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me again. My name is Ava Laura. I'm a life coach and intuitive consultant, and I generally prefer, or reference myself as a life coach with a mental health background and a holistic twist. And so a large part of what I do with my clients is integrating my sort of traditional social work and psychology background with energy healing and Reiki and spiritual healing and dream interpretation and life coaching and meditation and couples counseling as well. So, as you can imagine, I do a lot of couples work, and I also work particularly with a lot of women, very successful women, really killing it in the boardroom and in their businesses, but not so much in their relationships. So this is a place where I spend a lot of time with my clients, and I've had my own personal experiences. I'm human, right? And I've had my own personal experiences being married 14 years, going through the divorce process, and going from kind of like dating in my 20s, being married, and back dating in my 40s. That's a whole nother story. So I've had my own experience in terms of understanding what it really means to know your worth and coming out of a relationship and healing from that relationship and looking at the relationships in your life and looking at, are they feeding you? Are they healing you? Or are they harming you? And so I think that's such an important thing that we all at some point in our life or at points in our life have to do if we want to get to a certain level of success and in our life. We have to look at the relationships around us.
Thank you so much for that. And you said a couple of things there that I want to dive into a little bit. One is to know your worth. And that's a really interesting, I think, inquiry is how do you get to know your worth when the story that you've had or the reflections from relationships or partners has been that we're not worth much, we're not
Mm.
worth the effort, we're not worth it. How do you change that around, or how can you help with that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And what's really interesting is that it becomes a domino effect. And so while you may look at it as an outward reflection of people telling me that I'm not worth it or treating me that I'm not worth it, that actually comes from you first. So I have this saying that you teach and train people how to treat you. Not so you don't just teach them, but you train them as well. And I think that's a very important distinction. So this is something that happens over a period of time. It's not a one-time thing, but it's a continual thing. And so what happens is, if people don't see you as worthy, or they don't treat you the way you want to be treated, the first thing you got to look at is how are you treating yourself? What are you doing to yourself? Because you teach and train people how to treat you. So you have taught these people that you're not worthy, or they can treat you this way because of how you're allowing to be yourself to be treated. So I'm going to give you an example. And I know this can be so controversial, especially with my mother. So I teach a lot about self-care. And one of the things that I always see, particularly with women and particularly with mothers and wives, is that they always tend to put themselves last. Everybody else has to come first. I cannot take care of myself. I got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of my husband. Then I got to look at my job, my business, whatever's going on. And if there's anything left, then I get to take care of me. And the problem with that, well, there's numerous problems with that. And you know, that's a discussion for another day. But the reality is when you do that, you teach people that you're not worthy. You teach them that because you don't deem yourself as worthy. When you put yourself last and put everybody else in front of you, you are sending a message that everyone else is more important than you.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And and so is that something that you change just in your actions? Of where does that change start? Where does that
Everything
change
starts right here in your mind.
in your mind?
You know, I spend so much time working with people, and we really looking at their mindset and then looking at their emotional responses, because they both feed into each other, and understanding that, you know, on average, we have over 60,000 thoughts every single day, and over 80% of those thoughts are negative. And so a lot of the work is reprogramming. And so if we're talking about worthiness and understanding your worth, and, you know, having a high self-esteem and confidence, and walking to a room and owning who you are and knowing your power, if you don't have that, then you got to look at what are some of the things that happened in your past, probably particularly in your childhood. Are there any childhood hurts, childhood traumas? What happened, and how did you internalize that? And now, what are the thoughts that you are telling yourself? What are the stories that you are telling yourself? And how are you taking that same information, applying it into your life, and teaching people that those stories are now true and correct? So it starts in your mind first. It really starts with looking at what are the things that you are thinking, and where did those thoughts come from?
When you think about, you know, women who are in a place where they're in a toxic relationship, say, and the relationship is actually draining them,
Yes.
hurting them. You said harming, I think.
Yes.
Um, a lot of times, because of whatever the story is, there's this idea that, you know, oh, I can take it, or I can change him, or if I love harder, then he'll see my worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that in your work a lot?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
where do you start with that? Like, what is that from? What is that usually? What story is that? And how do you start helping women shift that?
Yeah. So, you know, so what's interesting, so when I first start working with a client, the first thing that I do is sort of a personal assessment. I tell my clients, I'm gonna get all up in your business. I'm gonna ask you a whole bunch of questions. Some of these questions you may have asked yourself or thought of before, and a lot of them you haven't. And even through that process, just asking these pointed questions, looking at their childhood, looking at their traumas and things, then we start to look at those and start to connect the dots, and start to look at patterns, and start to look at habits and things that were created from that. So it all starts with that personal inventory or that assessment. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of times we don't even just take time out to simply reflect and look at our lives and how we've gotten where we are and what created that. And so that's a powerful process for a lot of my clients to just take a moment to look at their lives and say, wow, you know what? I never thought about this. I never thought about the fact that my mother was in an abusive relationship, or my mother abused me, or my mother always put herself last and didn't take care of herself. And I took that on as I'm supposed to do that too. That's what womanhood means. And so looking at all of these things, starting to connect the dots, and then we can start to get to, okay, now what did that experience do to you? How did it affect you? How did it influence you? And we can start the reprogramming process.
Mm, right. Right. Wow. So it really sounds like taking a deep dive, pausing
Yes.
and helping to hear what you're doing. I love that too. Like what you watch the patterns.
Yes.
You know, what is the pattern? Well, what do you say to women? Like, why does it feel, sometimes it feels so hard to walk away from the toxic relationship, almost like a death, like death. Like basically
Mhm.
it's like if I walk away, I will die. What is that from? Do you
Yeah. So when you place so much of your time, energy, attention, emotions into something outside of yourself, and then it doesn't bear fruit, right? It's very difficult to say, you know what, I have been in this relationship 5 years and I've given this person my heart and soul. I've been in this relationship 10 years or whatever it is. How do you walk away from that when you thought that this relationship would bear fruit, and all you're getting are is nothing. You're not getting anything back in return. And so a couple of things have happened. One, you had this expectation that was not fulfilled, and you're not yet ready to acknowledge or accept the fact that it won't be fulfilled. And two, you're so drained mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, that you don't even have the energy to walk away and start over again. And so it can be very challenging. And so staying there doesn't mean that you want to be there. It doesn't mean that you necessarily think that at some point things will change. It just may mean that you're tired and you don't really want to start over. And so it's sort of like, I'm gonna deal with the devil I know versus the devil I don't know.
mm, yeah. Yes. And so what is your support? What are you what is the wisdom that you offer your clients or the women listening to this that are like, yes, that is how I feel? Where can they make this shift into something like self-love or the self-worth, digging deep? How do you coach them to that? How do you guide them to that?
And it is a process. Let me say that first and foremost. And it's not my wisdom. I mean, yes, I would say you're coming to me as the coach, as the expert, as the guide to assist you. But truthfully, my role is to help you to tap into your own wisdom and your own intuition and your own truth, because it's really all about your life and living life on your terms and truly living fully, and moving from settling to significance. And that has to come from inside you. And so my goal is to help you to do your own soul work, is to really tap into who you are, why it is that you came here, what is it that you want to do, and do you even know these things? Did you know at one point and it got lost along the way? Or are you having to now redefine yourself and refine yourself? Right. And so that is my goal. That's what I'm doing with my clients, is taking you through that process to your own truth, to your own understanding, to your own authenticity. And now, when you have that, you have your confidence back. When you're clear about who you are, when you've done your soul work, now you have your confidence to start to live from that place because you know you're clear. But when
Mm.
you lack clarity, right, when you're just kind of all over the place, you lack confidence. And so it's first allowing you to access your own truth and your own understanding, which builds up your own confidence. And now you can start to live from your place of power.
My next question was going to be like when, how to know when to walk away from the toxic relationship, because so much there's also a lot of teachers, a lot of books of like how to turn this around, and you know you can it's kind of this idea that if I do enough work, that this relationship will turn around, but it's coming from a place of lack or fear to be alone. Are there some key points for women to
Yes.
note?
Yes. I mean, so first, let me say the obvious. If there's any type of abuse, mental, emotional, physical, sexual, whatever, on any level, obviously it's time to go. And so, and it might be obvious for some of us, but for some of us, we've been so stuck that that's not so obvious. Sometimes we need that reminder. So I want to say that first and foremost. Any type of abuse is time to walk away. And so it's not about should I walk away? It's about what is the best way for me to walk away,
Mhm.
right? That's what the question is there. Now, there's some more other subtle things that happen, right? That I'm not really sure. I think so, but I'm not sure. And let me just say that a lot of times as women, we already know because our intuition is strong. And so what it is that we are not listening to our intuition. We have not tapped into it. We have turned it off for whatever reason. And so we already know. And so another thing is and we talked about it, when you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired, like you are just drained on every level and you can't take it anymore. It's time to go. um when you find yourself giving and not getting anything back in return, or you're giving, and I hate to quantify because there's no real quantification, but you're giving 100% and maybe getting 20% back, right? So what you're getting back is so minuscule in comparison to what you're giving. It's time to go. And the other thing is, when you feel so much lack in your life, like you feel this sort of constant heartache, right? Like just slow, and not a big break, but like this dull heartache every single day because you're not being fulfilled. Kind of like when you have food you can eat, but it's never enough. And so there's always this hunger. That's when you know it is time to go. It's this very slow, methodical, painful feeling that just day in and day out creeps up on you, and it's just never fulfilled. It's time to go.
Oof, wow, when you were saying I've been there. I know that feeling. And that first one is, when you were talking about abuse, just just briefly, some examples of, because I think that it is true. Like, what is emotional abuse? What does that sound like?
So I'm gonna give you an example that is very challenging because it's subtle, but it's absolutely emotional abuse. So a lot of times we might think of, I don't know, I love this person and they're not showing me any love, or something like that. But a lot of times emotional abuse looks like you don't even feel safe to show up fully as who you are, right? If you try to advance in some level of your life, or, baby, guess what happened to me? I got this new job, or, I made, I got $100,000 in my business, or whatever it is. It's not celebrated. It's not even acknowledged. It's not validated. And you feel yourself sort of shrinking because you feel like you need to be in this box. You have to look a certain way in order to be accepted. And so now you can't show up fully as yourself. And so it really looks like who you are as an individual is not loved, is not validated, is not appreciated. You lack intimacy. So those very simple moments where, you could be sitting watching TV together and holding hands, like you don't even feel safe to do those type of things. Um, and so it can be very, very subtle, because when we talk about emotional abuse, a lot of times it's not something that you're getting that's outwardly happening, but it's what you're not getting. And
Mm.
if you're used to not getting, right? If you grew up in a family where there wasn't affection, or there wasn't, you weren't told I love you, you weren't hugged, or you weren't validated. Now you get into this relationship and you don't even realize that it's not normal not to get this love and not to get those hugs and not to get the affection and not get to the validation because it's what you've always experienced. What's not happening versus what is happening.
Mm. Wow, thank you. That was so clear. That was so clear. Yes, and it sounds like when you start working with your new clients, they go through a really introspective process, a real deep inquiry process, and then you're able to help see the patterns and name
Yes.
them. Do you work with women that are still in the toxic relationship cycle and help them move through it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so
Absolutely.
you're saying that by having this inquiry and then start to like get clear on your vision, that
Mhm.
that can help build the confidence to take the step, whatever that would be. That.
Yes. Absolutely. Because even let's say you decide to stay, you're going to show up so differently that even if you decide to stay, that person probably would not want to stay with you because they're going to want you to revert back to where you were.
Hmm.
So it really does become a decision. And like I have a client right now who's going through a divorce, and you talk about toxic. I mean, this relationship checks off all the boxes. And it's really interesting because of course he was the breadwinner and made, makes a lot of money in their businesses. He's had several affairs, she doesn't even know how many. She's gotten STDs. He's been extremely careless even during COVID in terms of just traveling everywhere and doing all of these things, and then of course wanting to come see the kids when, I mean, how is it safe when you're just kind of doing whatever you want? Control the money, um, left her out of so many decisions, and still thinks it's acceptable and okay behavior, and we're going to be fine. And so when she's, saying, "Well, I want a divorce," and trying to go through this process, he's shocked. Like he never thought this was going to happen. He literally thought that what he was doing was okay, and she was going to accept it because he comes from a family where it is okay, and men treat their women like that, and they just accept it. And again, like I said, we know she could obviously see it, but she didn't truly understand the depths of it until we started doing this work. Because again, we come with our own thoughts, we come with our experiences, we come with our stories. And what's really interesting about relationships is that there's so much that goes on, people don't talk about. You don't necessarily even know that the type of relationship that you're in is unhealthy or dysfunctional if it's what you've always seen, because you don't know what's going on in other people's relationships. And it's not until you do your own exploration or until you start talking to friends or other people, and the truth, not the outward appearances of it, but the actual truth behind the scenes of what's going on, you start to see, well, wow, my relationship doesn't look like that, or I've never experienced that, or oh my God, like your husband does that for you? I've never had that. And so we don't have these honest conversations. So we don't even know. We know how we feel. We know we feel like, oh, this is not all that it cracked up to be. I mean, I thought when I got married, I was going to feel different and it was going to be different. But we don't always know the depths of what we're missing out on because we don't know what's normal and what's not normal.
Right, right. And then on the other side of that, it's like, so we've lowered this expectation because of what
Yes.
maybe our family pattern was, but then also we've seen all these movies or read these things. So then we have this
Yes.
other
Oh, the
thing,
fairy tale. Yes, the Disney
right?
fairy tales.
Yeah, so then we go into relationships thinking he's gonna fix all of this and
Wow.
be my shining knight, right?
Sorry,
Wow.
boo. Yeah, that's not happening. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't show up and be a knight in other ways, right? But you have to be in a space of creating that, because relationships are a co-creation. And so if you're not fully showing up within yourself and your own power, you are not going to attract a man that's going to do that for you. Because even if he came, you wouldn't recognize it. You would find a way to sabotage it because you wouldn't even understand that behavior.
Right. Oh, I love this. So that's what I want to talk about is showing up in your power. So how do we get there? I know it's a process, but what are
Yeah.
some of the ways that manifests in our mind, in our actions? What does that look like?
It really looks like, so one of the things that I've recognized, when a lot of my clients come to me and I speak to people, like we get so caught up in adulting, right? We get so caught up in going to work, paying the bills, taking care of my family, really like living life on other people's terms, going through the motions of life and not really living fully. And one of the things that I realized that as adults, many of us forgot how to do or don't know how to do is we don't know how to dream. We forgot how to dream. Like when we were young and somebody asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you had all these fantasies, like you would wear all these like crazy clothes and, you would just play and do all these things. And you thought it was perfectly fine because you're a child, you're dreaming, you're having fun. We don't care about reality. It doesn't matter. Right. You were sort of in this beautiful insulated bubble. And when we become adults, we think that we can't dream anymore. We think that we have to somehow live this life that measures up to somebody else. Well, my parents told me I need to be a doctor, so I'm going to study med school, or I'm going to go to med school. Or my parents told me I need to be a lawyer. My dad told me, well, you would be a great lawyer like your mom, you should be a lawyer. And I was like, heck no, I don't want to do that. I would have been miserable if I did that. Right. But how many people that's exactly what they do? Well, I'm supposed to be an engineer or an architect or whatever, but I really want to be a writer. I really want to be an artist. I really want to travel the world, like whatever that is. So we forget how to dream. And so one of the first things that we can look at is like, what do you really want to do with your life? What is your value system? What is important to you? What brings you alive? What is your passion? And start to connect to those things again, because that's the energy that is going to be the driving force or the motivation for you to kind of get your life back on track and living authentically in who you are. That's how you get your power back.
When you come into your power and you've gotten this vision for your life, and then you feel like, oh, I can walk away and I can move on to the next step. How do we, and this might be a huge question, but then there's this part about rebuilding
Mm-hmm.
trust, right?
Yeah.
Trust that's been broken. And for me, I see mostly it starts right in here first. I broke my own trust, right?
Yeah.
But like what you said earlier, like I
Yeah.
stopped listening to intuition. I stopped listening to what I already knew was true. What do you say about how do you go back to that? How do you heal that bond with ourselves, with life?
I mean, you absolutely have to forgive yourself. No question. And it's so interesting. We talk a lot about forgiving other people, but the biggest personal oftentimes that we have to forgive is ourselves, because the reality is there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of sort of kicking ourselves and like, you know what? I put myself in this situation and ultimately I'm the one to blame. And so there is a forgiveness process. There is something that I also do with my clients called a cord cutting, which is sort of releasing negative energy between relationships. And sometimes that cord cutting is a part of the forgiveness process. And so that's a very real phenomenon. And I think the most important thing is the self awareness of it and understanding that you do need to forgive yourself so that you can move on and you don't get stuck in that sort of cycle of, I can't believe I did this to myself. I don't want to repeat this habit. And because you keep that at the forefront of your mind, you tend to recreate it because you haven't allowed yourself to really forgive, release, and let go. Mhm.
What about when people say, like, this is my karma, or when women are like, oh, this relationship is we're soulmates. And
Mhm.
so past lives and that, can you, I know you know about this, so can you
Yeah.
speak to it a little bit?
So, I mean, and obviously everybody's sort of view on this is a little different. And I believe that there are multiple soulmates, and I don't necessarily believe that soulmates come in a romantic form, right? You can have an amazing business partner in your soulmates. You can have an amazing best friend in your soulmates. And so I don't believe it's limited to a romantic relationships. A soulmate can appear in any type of relationship. I do believe that innately people come to teach you something in any relationship. That's why relationships are so powerful, because they truly are a reflection of what is going on within you. They absolutely are a mirror. So people show up to teach you things about yourself, and anybody can do that, not necessarily a soulmate relationship. But with that being said, I don't believe that any type of soulmate relationship should be harmful, kill your spirit, drain your energy, right? I do want to learn. I need lessons, but I don't have to get a lesson like that, right? That's a choice. So that's not karma. That's not a soulmate relationship. That is absolutely a choice. And it's one thing if you kind of end up in a relationship like this unconsciously because you just don't know better. But once you know better, you do better.
I want to leave this with, is there one takeaway or action step that you would like to share with the audience today?
Yeah, the first thing is like we said, really take a personal inventory. Start to become more aware. Look at the things that you are thinking on a daily basis. Write down your thoughts. Write down your feelings. Notice if you feel that tug at your heart every single day, if you feel drained, if you just feel wiped out, if you feel like you just can't do anymore, pay attention to what's going on in your head and in your heart and see how that's mirrored in your body. Because the reality is, all these things are going to show up in your body as well. A lot of times I've seen women who you start to get sick and all these things start to happen. You start to see you're destroying other aspects of your life because of this experience and your relationship, and it really starts to just echo and in other parts of your world, causing chaos. So start to pay attention to those things. I know it's not necessarily sexy, right? I want to do this ceremony, I want to do this, but it is so important to take an honest assessment and an honest look at your life. That awareness is the point of everything. Then you can decide, okay, now that I'm aware of some things, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Where can I get help to help me with these things? But it starts with that awareness.
And then could you tell us a little bit about where we can find you, and what is the gift that you're giving to the women today?
Yeah, so you can find me at, well, I have it, avalaura.com. I am Googleicious. I am so easy to find. I am the only Avalaura. So literally you go to Avalaura. I will pop up with my head wrap. So you can connect with me there. You can schedule a consultation, listen to my podcast, all kind of goodies, connect with me on social media. My free gift is a part of your assessment, particularly around self-care. So helping you to look at how are you caring for yourself, right? What are some of the things that you're doing now? What are some of the things that you need to do? And so that inventory will help to kind of get the process started.
Thank you so much, ladies. You've got to find her. Find her in her head wrap. She'll pop up, and she's so gorgeous. And this energy. Thank you so much for being
Thank you for
here and
having
for
me.
sharing this wisdom. It's been truly an honor. And very much thank you.
Thank you.